All right, well, thank you. We're going to talk exactly about what she said, but we're going to touch on a lot of these areas. And, you know, when I hear that we've been doing this 47 years, what I'm really talking about, what she was referencing, Ray Sawyer, who's sitting right here, got the same shirt that I have on, he and I got started in the biostimulant industry in 1977, 1978. So we've been doing this about 47 years. What that really means is two things. One, we've really found and discovered a lot of things not to do. And it also means we're not young men anymore. So we do have a little bit of age upon ourselves. But, you know, Ray and I kind of consider that he and I were kind of like wine. We get better with age. So let's get into this, and we'll see where it ends up taking us. You know, we'll give a little bit of background information. What's that, John?
So you don't have to stand there. Can you just go back and forward with it?
Oh, I am really dangerous with these things. A couple times ago that I was using this, I accidentally hit a button and flipped everything upside down. It took us almost 15 minutes to get everything turned back around the right way. But give a little background information. You go back about 65, 70, 75 years ago, primarily in the 1950s, agriculture went through what is referred to as a green revolution. And basically what that referred to is there was a lot of new chemistries coming into the agricultural market, and frankly it resulted in a huge increase in average yield, average production per acre. Now a lot of that was also due to improvement in varieties, a lot of breeding work being done. So it was pretty exciting what was taking place in the last half of the previous century. But, as is so often the case, some of these advancements, it did bring in some potential issues as well. And some of these is we started seeing more and more serious soil degradation, erosion, things like this. We started seeing signs of environmental contamination. We saw depletion of natural resources and nutrient reserves. And we, of course, started seeing pathogenic resistance to a lot of these chemistries. So a lot of this advancement, it did not come without some issues. There's a book, and I'm rereading it right now. If I had finished it, I was going to give it away. So if I finish it tonight, we might still give it away at the booth tomorrow. It's Tales from the Underground by an individual by the name of Dr. David Wolf out of Cornell University. Fascinating book about the scientific principles of how this world was created, the role of microorganisms in the creation of our planet, the role of microorganisms in our soils and in our environment today. It's just a fascinating book about how things work on this planet. And it wasn't in this book, but another book that I was reading, they asked the question, you know, are the microorganisms here to serve us, or are we here to serve them? Because there's a whole lot more of them, even from a mass standpoint, than just numbers. But it's just a fascinating read. Any of you that enjoy reading, I would recommend writing this down. It was published about 20 years ago, 21, 22 years ago. You can generally find it on Amazon in a used condition for $7, $8. And it's just an absolutely fascinating read. But, you know, here about 20 years ago, we started seeing articles showing up in publications, agricultural publications or horticultural publications, about biostimulants. Now, part of this, I think, is in response to some of the things that we were seeing in production agriculture. And a really good example of that is about 15, 20 years ago, Neither Ray nor I are pathologists. That's not what we specialize in. I think an individual has to be a little odd to specialize in pathology. You have to like to see really ugly stuff. And I will make the comment, a number of you in this room, you send me really ugly pictures every summer. And sometimes I can immediately recognize what the issue is. Sometimes I have to go start looking at it. And sometimes I even bring in some of my pathology friends and say, okay, well, what's this? I don't recognize this. What is it? One thing I've noticed about a lot of pathologists is you take them this really ugly, nasty plant, and it will be like a young kid at Christmas morning. I mean, they get excited about this stuff. But, you know, even they oftentimes do not know exactly what the pathogen is. And they have to go into further research with a microscope, trying to identify what the pathogens are. But anyway, about 15 to 20 years ago, Ray and I decided we're going to attend the American Phytopathological Society annual convention. We felt totally like a fish out of water. I mean, these guys were talking in terms that we could understand about every third or fourth word. But one thing that became apparent, because speaker after speaker after speaker was referencing that fungicides have a limited lifespan today. They will be taken off the market just because of the potential issues that a lot of these chemistries are bringing into the overall ecological and environmental aspects of our world. Now, that has not happened yet, but they were convinced that it was going to happen. And the other thing that became really interesting, this was on the second day, Ray and I had been listening to all this nasty stuff for an entire day and a half, and we had a coffee break. Ray and I were standing around trying to be invisible, but one of us, I don't remember which one of us said it, one of us said, you know, we don't see any of these problems. And someone overheard us. And they came over and they said, what do you mean y'all don't see any of these issues? So we did start discussing it with them. And it wasn't long before there was 10, 15 guys around us asking, why don't you see some of the issues that we're commonly seeing in our growing localities? But anyway, here about 20 years ago, you did start seeing issues of, like I said, agricultural, horticultural publications, American fruit grower, vegetable grower. You started seeing articles on the role of biostimulants in agriculture. That made me both very happy because it is kind of confirmed that, okay, what Ray and I started doing in 1978, it has some validity. It also kind of irritated me. Not only did it please me, but it irritated me because, you know, listen to this guy, what he's saying in this publication, I know more about it than he does. Why aren't they asking me? You know, we all like to receive a little bit of recognition and attention. Ray and I still haven't received much of that, but then we don't advertise. We don't really go out and try and let everybody know what we're doing. But one thing I have noticed across the last 20 years, there does seem to be a little bit of confusion in exactly what are biostimulants. What role are they supposed to play in production, agriculture, and horticulture? And when I say that, I would make the comment that there's a number of companies actively selling biostimulants. They probably have a very good product, but I think they're completely misrepresenting it. And Ray and I went through about 5-10 years of that. We had some excellent products. We just didn't know what they were and how they were supposed to work. So let's get into biostimulants just a little bit. And I will say, I do think we're on the early stages of what I'm going to refer to as the biological revolution. I think in the next 20 years, we're going to see 10 times more advancement than what we've seen across the last 20 years. Part of the reason I say that is, I would guess, I don't know this for a fact, but I would guess right now there is probably more research going into soil microbiology, soil biochemistry, plant physiology, ecology, than all the other sciences put together. It is just amazing the work that's being done out there. So what is a biostimulant? The European Union definition is it's a material that generally is a non-nutrient, but it helps improve the nutritional processes of crops, in particular by improving how efficiently they use nutrients and how it helps build the resistance to environmental conditions. So basically it helps with nutrient efficiency and it helps with particularly abiotic stress situations. Here in the United States, very similar. It's a substance or a microorganism that when applied to seeds, plants, or the rhizosphere, stimulates natural processes to enhance or benefit nutrient uptake, nutrient use efficiency, tolerance to abiotic stress, or crop quality and yield. So very, very similar definitions. So when or ISP, when we're discussing biostimulants, what we're really saying is how do we impact, hopefully in a positive way, the microbial aspects of our growing environment and also the macro species that are in our growing environments, but also how can we help with the yield potential, improving the productive potential of a soil? How do we bring out the genetic expression of a plant? How do we make that plant healthier to reduce disease susceptibility? How do we improve the crop quality, particularly flavor and storage ability? How do we do all of this with the use of biostimulants? Some of it's pretty simple. We just adjust various management inputs, practices. But some of it is actually a lot more complicated. And part of what brings it in from a complicated standpoint is the lack of uniformity in the environments that we're working in. Ray and I also attended an international biostimulant conference back in 03, 04, 05, 15, 7. Anyway, some years back in Miami. And I love academians. I'm not one. I'm kind of a let's get down in the dirt and play and get dirty kind of guy. But I love these guys because two reasons. First of all, they have a lot more education in little specific areas than I do. And secondly, they've got incredible equipment. And there was a gentleman from Europe, and he said the soil biome can vary from night to day, difference this far apart. Now that's not very far apart. So when we start looking at, say, your vegetable garden, from one end to the other, there can be huge variances in the soil physical structure, the soil biological makeup, the living profile of the soil. There can be very strong differences in the soil chemical makeup. So some of the challenges is how to address these variances and make a pretty simple program that's going to be economically viable. So what are biostimulants? Again, this is from the European Union. It's beneficial microbes, fermentation extracts, humic acids, fulvic acids, protein hydrolysates, amino acids, peptides, seaweed extracts, other plant derivatives, inorganic compounds, silica, selenium, cobalt, phosphite, and chitin. ISP as a company, and I'm not supposed to talk a lot about ISP. This is supposed to be a general informational meeting. But as a company, ISP, we work with 5 of the 6 categories. And we're very active in all 5 of these categories. So when it comes to the world of biostimulants, ISP, we are very, very involved in what's going on out there. Some of the things that biostimulants can do for you, they can improve the soil biological populations, the general rhizosphere. Most of the soil biology is going to be found in fairly close proximity to the root zone, which is called the rhizosphere. It's going to help increase soil stable organic matter. It's going to help improve the soil productive potential, the soil physical structure itself. It's going to help improve water management, nutrient efficiency, genetic expression. It's going to help reduce the negative impact of both abiotic and biotic stress factors. It's going to, and doing that, it's going to reduce susceptibility to disease, insect pathogens, and it should theoretically, if all goes right, help improve yield and significantly help improve quality, flavor, storage ability. So the question arises, why biostimulants? Weren't we doing pretty good in the last half of the last century? Things were going well. Well, I already listed some of the issues that we were starting to see. Some of the issues that frankly are unsustainable. So one of the primary reasons, and I touched on this I think last year at this meeting, is one of the most precious resources on this planet is productive farmland. And it's something that we're not making any more of. The number goes down every single year. Here in the United States, we lose on average about 2 million acres of productive farmland every year. Because of that, I just joined the American Farmland Trust, made a respectable donation to them because I'm tired of seeing buildings being put on good farm ground. It just makes me almost want to cry. My son lives on the west side of Chicago. Some of the most beautiful land you ever want to see, and they're just insistent upon putting more houses on it. And that's just borderline criminal. But it's not just a problem here in the United States. It's a problem worldwide. They estimate that worldwide approximately 5 billion acres of what was previously productive land has now been degraded to the point of where production is a challenge. Now, one thing about the planet is the number of people on this planet is not decreasing. Our number of productive acres is significantly decreasing. The number of people that are on this planet are increasing every single year, particularly in some of the other countries, particularly some of the less developed countries, Asia, Africa, things like this. One thing I've noticed about studying people is we all like to eat. And we become very unruly when we don't have enough to eat. So food production to meet the growing population on this planet is a pretty important aspect of moving forward. This gentleman, and whenever you see something down on the bottom in smaller script, it's a comment that I am not making. It's a comment that I've found somebody else making. This is from Advances in Agronomy, published in 2021. And this gentleman was basically saying soil productivity will be one of the most important environmental factors, perhaps even the most important, for ensuring the survival of humanity during the 21st century. I've read estimations that by the year 2050, we will have to produce as much food every single year as we produced in the last 500 years combined. That's a lot of food. But if we don't, somebody's going to go hungry. And like I said, people get very unruly when they start getting hungry. So we've all heard the term sustainable agriculture. I'll tell you right now, and I'm 100% confident in this, sustainable is not going to be good enough. We're going to have to turn this completely around, and we should begin practices that are much more than sustainable. We need to get into remediation, and more importantly, we need to move into regeneration. And a significant aspect of soil remediation, regeneration, it deals with the microorganisms in the soil itself. They are very, very capable of doing a lot of beneficial things if we just give them a little bit of help. So, again, why biostimulants? Well, soil fertility is defined as the function of the soil to act as the mediator of nutrients, water, and air for plants and the ediphon. Now, the Edifon, I had to look that up. What it means is soil life. One of the things that I've noticed about a lot of researchers is if I have a complicated term and a simple term, which one am I going to use? Well, let's go with the complicated term. So that's all Edifon means, is the soil life. But he's saying that basically soil fertility, or the productive potential of the soil life plays a significant role. And it's the result of physical, chemical, biological processes that leads to the release of nutrients, water, aeration, stability to the plant, and the soil life again, as well as the absence of any substance that may inhibit growth. In that second part, we'll get back into that a little bit later. So this is a very simple diagram of a productive soil potential. It has physical characteristics, it has chemical characteristics, it has biological characteristics. I know a lot of you guys in this room have seen this diagram before. In the center of it is soil, organic matter. This should consist of about 5% of your soil profile. About 25% of that soil profile should be air, and about 25% of it should be water. Now, that's under ideal conditions. Very seldom are we growing under ideal conditions. So we're trying to figure out how can we reduce the negative impact of these various weather stresses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When it's too dry, it's too wet, et cetera. We have to manage all of that. Well, one of the ways is we can really work toward building our soil organic matter. I made the comment it should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 5%. Back where I live in Grand Haven, Michigan, I'm proud to say that my organic matter is 0.1%. That gives me a lot of work to do. I got a lot of room for improvement. But, you know, when I hit 0.5%, John, am I going to have a party or what? I mean, I've done some tremendous things. So I've got a lot of upside potential. But the carbon, the soil organic matter, does act as a sink for carbon. What's one of the things that we've all just been lambasted with for the last 15 years anyway? Greenhouse gases. I mean, that's all we hear. We got to reduce greenhouse gases. Well, one of the best ways to do that is start rebuilding organic matter, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that will be taken in by the plants. The plants will break that down. They will store carbon in the soil organic matter, the releasing oxygen, and everything can proceed for quite a bit longer. That's a serious thing that we can all work toward. The physical structure of the soil. I mean, obviously we're talking about clays, sands, loams, etc. The physical structure that we can see and feel when we're holding a handful of our soil. But physical structure, if we can improve that soil organic matter, it is going to help reduce erosion. It's going to help improve water infiltration. It's going to help improve water holding capacity. You guys out here in South Dakota, you all have this little period of the year that frankly is not the best for growing particularly produce. It's called the summer. You know, it's okay, but it's not the best environmental conditions for growing produce. As you start building and increasing the organic content of your soil, you're going to see the stress factors upon those crops really reduce. You're going to be able to hold more moisture when you get into a dry spell. If you get a heavy rain, theoretically it's going to drain a lot better. You're going to see less stress factors from just simply heat. A healthy plant can withstand much more heat than an unhealthy plant. Soil organic matter is going to significantly improve the soil's capacity to store and supply essential nutrients to the plant and to retain toxic elements. It's going to really be a beautiful profile for the soil microorganisms to live and thrive in. Organic matter plays many roles. University of Minnesota, they made the comment that a pound of stabilized organic matter can have 5 times as much CEC as a pound of clay. Now CEC, cation exchange capacity, that's a number that gives you an indication of how many cationic nutrients can that soil hold. And when I say hold, I mean physically or electronically attached to an organic matter or to a clay, colloid, etc., and be stable. Oftentimes we see CEC come back fairly high, fairly low. Organic matter is going to impact that. And if we go over to base saturation, we start looking at hydrogen, and hydrogen is 0, what that's telling us is that all of the exchange sites in that soil are filled up. There's no more room. Anybody ever played the game musical chairs? That's our soils. The song's playing, and when it stops, you've added a bunch of fertility. If you don't have some open chairs, there's no place for that nutrient to go, that fertilizer that you spent your hard-earned dollar on. There's no place for it to go except to be used by a plant or to leach out of, generally speaking, the root zone. And that's something that we don't want. We start leaching nutrients out of the root zone. First of all, I spend a lot of money that I'm not getting any return on. And secondly, I'm creating environmental impact that if I keep it up, somebody's going to come and visit me. And if you don't believe that, I can take you to a lot of guys in Pennsylvania in the Chesapeake Bay watershed that the government has stepped in and said, this is what you will and this is what you will not do. Very common out there. So when I'm looking at a soil analysis report, I'm really looking first at organic matter, secondly at CEC. I want to know what kind of nutrient efficiency can I have in my soil environment. Soil physical structure, it's also important because it's one of the major factors determining how fast water, air enter and move throughout the soil, which in turn influences soil resource availability for the plants, habitat for other organisms, including fungi. One of the things that I will say about this, most of our pathogens, soil-borne pathogens that we deal with in growing produce crops, they're what is referred to as anaerobes. They do not survive well in an oxygen-rich environment. So when we start getting that soil profile, instead of 25% air, 25% water, now it's 0% air and 50% water. Here come the anaerobes. Here come the pathogens. So the more that we can improve the organic matter, build the fluffiness of that soil, improve drainage, et cetera, the better off we're going to be as far as keeping pathogens numbers to a minimum. Physical structure, and I say here sand, loam, clay. Like I said, out there where I live in Grand Haven, I have sand. It's just pure sand. If I don't like it, okay, and I don't. I mean, I've been on a 7-year campaign to build the organic matter, but if I really get fed up with it and I don't like it, what's my answer? I really only have one answer. Put the place up for sale and go buy another piece of land. It's just that simple. So soil chemistry, it does include the soil pH, the exchange capacity, the percent of organic matter, the inherent nutrient components that may be present in any particular soil. Depending on which source you're looking at, about 17 to 19 essential nutrient elements are considered essential today. Also, as part of the soil chemistry would be anything that you've added to the soil, such as fertilizers, fungicides, herbicides, things like this. And all of those materials are going to have a direct and almost immediate effect upon soil biology. So some of the things that we do in production agriculture, it's okay, you've done it, you're going to have to do it again next year, but I want everybody to keep in mind that what you just did, what impact is that going to have upon those little creatures down in your soil, which frankly, everything you do is dependent upon. So they'll take some abuse, they'll take some misuse, but you got to be nice to them later. You know, it's just like I was telling Bud last night. You know, if I came to work for Bud, I have no doubt in my mind I would work from sun up to sundown, and Bud would be a stern taskmaster. I mean, he would put me to work. That's okay, because Bud also said come sundown, he'll treat me really right. So when we do some of these things in production agriculture, you know, we need to do them. So let's do them. But let's keep in mind that sometimes we have to come back in and treat all these little organisms that are doing so much for us. We need to treat them right again. So soil biology is the third major soil property. This is another quote. It's from a research paper on abiotic stress tolerance. The diversity and abundance of the bacterial community in any agroecosystem is critical for maintaining the soil quality, productivity, and ecological balance. So based upon the research that this gentleman has saying, there's all those microorganisms, they're not just potentially helpful, he's just point blank saying they are critical. Without them, everything's going to stop. This is a little simple diagram. This would show an area of soil profile about 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter. You can just see some of the relationships in size. Part of what I found interesting about this is not just all of the organisms that we can almost see with our naked eye, but some of the things that we can't see. I was reading the other day, and this dealt with clays. 1 gram of clay, which is not very much clay, 1 gram of clay would have the surface area of an entire baseball diamond. That's how much surface area clay has. Now, we've already talked about organic matter can hold more nutrient than clay can. And 1 gram of clay can hold a lot of nutrient. So it's really important that we not only impact soils from a physical standpoint, but we also impact our soils from a biological standpoint so we can really, again, start building that organic content of the soil. How can you tell if your soil's in pretty good shape?
Smells right.
Pardon?
Smells right.
It smells right. Yeah. First of all, I want you to get down on your hands and knees. I already made the comment. I'm a guy that I like to get in the dirt. I like to be dirty. I don't believe in being clean during the growing season. Get down on your hands and knees and just start digging in that soil. Pick up a big old handful. Don't take the top ½ inch. Get down, just kind of scrape that off to the side. But how does that soil come up? Does it come up loose and friable? I mean, does it crumb nicely? Are you bringing up one solid chunk? But that's going to tell you a lot about the physical structures in your organic matter. Next thing I want you to do is I want you to get that handful of soil, and I tell everybody, if you don't end up with a brown circle on the end of your nose, you didn't get it close enough. I want you to get your face right in there and smell it. Everybody know what that nice, rich soil odor smells like? Does anybody in the room not know what that smells like? Maybe you've never smelled it on your soils, but maybe a neighbor's. Or go out in the fence row and dig up a handful of soil. Go out between trees in a windrow, dig that up and smell it. That odor is telling you a lot. That's waste materials from organisms called actinomycetes. And generally speaking, if you have those present, you've got at least something going for you in your soil biological profile. And of course, there are a number of lab tests being developed, particularly here in the last 5 to 10 years, that can give you numbers on your soil biological profile. There's a lot of interactions between plants, microorganisms, and the soil. I mean, this is not a fairly static situation. It's continually changing. It's highly active. Plants are always exuding compounds that the organisms are going to use as potential food sources, particularly sugars, things like this. The microorganisms are continually throwing out exudates and they're dying and other organisms are processing their dead bodies. They're producing compounds that the plants can use. Both of them are impacting the soil, both the microorganisms and the plants that are growing in that soil. It's an incredibly dynamic situation. Three mechanisms that are usually put forward to explain how microbial activity can boost plant growth is manipulating the hormonal signaling of plants. A lot of microorganisms, they do signal the plants to do certain things, to perform certain functions. And this is an important aspect. Microorganisms, they can help repel or outcompete pathogenic organisms. We have a material that's incredibly expensive, very effective. I'm going to mention the product name. There's information on our table out there. It's called Tiffy-Max. It's designed to help suppress Phytophthora in soil environments. Phytophthora may not be an issue here in South Dakota yet. It's a widespread issue in Michigan. It's a widespread issue in Indiana. A number of pumpkin and winter squash growers, peppers, they are now out of business because of Phytophthora. The trichoderma that's inherent in that product loves to eat Phytophthora. They think Phytophthora is delicious. So if we can enhance or increase the number of trichoderma in that rhizosphere, and they will infect the root, then we can stand a much better chance. And I suspect they probably don't like Fusarium or Verticillium quite as much as Phytophthora, but I bet, they would eat that also. It's kind of like me. Would I prefer a pastry or some of that cantaloupe back there? I'd probably prefer the pastry, but I'll eat the cantaloupe too. So there's a lot of that going on in the soil. And then increases the bioavailability of soil-borne nutrients. Every nutrient in existence depends upon soil biological activity to become plant available. So again, the soil biology is very, very important. And this just goes on to basically say the same thing I just said. The second paragraph here, I'm going to discuss that. In natural settings, these microbial nutrient transformations, they're key drivers of plant growth. Now, what does the word key mean? Does that mean, kind of good? This guy right here said, that means it's important. That means it's important and it's essential. If we can enhance soil microorganisms, enhance their activity, we're going to have a significant impact upon nutrient efficiency and nutrient availability. Perhaps more importantly, nutrient availability in that soil environment. Again, this is just basically saying the same thing. For plants to access a lot of these hard-to-get-to nutrients, it is dependent upon soil biological activity. I like this comment a lot. I've really gotten to where I like the University of Minnesota. I used to hate the University of Minnesota. What do they call themselves? The Golden Gophers or something like that? I don't like gophers. I don't care if they're golden or not. I don't like them. But across the last 3 or 4 years, University of Minnesota is becoming one of my favorite universities because they're doing some incredible work in soils and understanding soils. This is their comment. If soil microbes aren't working for you, well, they're more than likely going to be working against you. The microbial profile in the soil, it does include hundreds of pathogens. And if we don't have a healthy soil microbiome, chances are we're going to have, almost certainly going to have, an unhealthy soil microbiome. In other words, we're going to have a lot of disease. We're going to have a lot of problems. When beneficials dominate the community, they suppress pathogens by competition and predation, and they act as a physical protective barrier for plant roots, what I was just talking about the trichoderma can do with Phytophthora. This is also from the University of Minnesota. If the farm system depends on and supports their activities, more biomass means yield, more yield and positive activities will develop. If the farm system solely depends on chemical inputs instead of biological inputs, beneficial biomass and activities will decline. Now, what I like about that comment right there is they didn't say it might decline. If you're dependent solely upon chemical inputs, it's not saying it might decline. What they're saying is it will decline. It's just a matter of time. You're heading 90 miles an hour down a dead-end street that's got a concrete wall sitting at the end of it. So, one of the things I want to discuss here, and we've already discussed some of it, the things that microorganisms will really bring to the forefront, in my opinion, is they enhance the plant's resistance or they reduce the plant's susceptibility, however you want to phrase it, to both biotic and abiotic stress resistance. This is one of the things that Ray and I have seen just for decades. We get into a hot, dry spell, we've got to feel the field corn, half of it's got some bios, half of it doesn't. The half that doesn't, it'll start stressing first. Eventually, if it stays hot and dry, well, ours will stress too. But the control area will stress first. And we've seen that in research here in South Dakota, up north of Sioux Falls, for several summers now. So we can really make a major impact upon how that plant is going to respond to stress. But I might explain this. Biotic stress is damage that's done basically from other living organisms, such as bacteria, viruses, fungi, et cetera, insects. I would also add nutritional stress is a biotic stress factor. The plant is basically lacking in some essential nutrients where it cannot perform all of the necessary or beneficial physiological activities that plant should be performing. And one of the things I like to do is I like to relate plants to people. Do y'all know anybody that's got a really crummy diet? And generally speaking, they're catching the cold every year. They're catching the flu every year. I mean, we're exactly the same way. Our health, our immune system, our immune responses is dependent upon the nutritional intake that we take into our bodies. The same is true for the plants. The nutritional materials that are available to that plant for physiological activities, for growth, for building the immune responses, is very, very important. Abiotic stress is basically just stress outside of the plant, non-living sources. Normally that's going to be weather. So when we're talking about these soil microorganisms, the soil biological profile in a soil, if you remember several slides back, one of the things that a lot of microorganisms are capable of doing as they go through their life processes, they will secrete certain compounds. These compounds can be taken into the plant and be utilized in building not only yield, quality, etc., but in building the plant's immune responses to various stress factors. Plants have developed complex sensory mechanisms to identify biotic invasion and overcome the detriment of growth, yield, and plant survival. They have just a wide range of responses to fight off various pathogens, to fight off various stress factors if we've done our part, if we provided them with the building blocks to do so. To successfully defend against biotic threats, plants have evolved a complex immune system responsible for surveillance, perception, and the activation of defense. Plant immunity requires multiple signaling processes the outcome of which vary according to the lifestyle of the invading pathogen. This is probably the primary area that I've been studying for the last 2 to 2.5 years, is this plant immune system. And I will be really upfront, we don't completely understand it. We're learning more every single year, and it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. How many of you ever smelled the smell of mown grass? That's my second favorite odor on the planet. First is good, healthy, rich soil. What is that smell of mown grass? That's basically one of the grass plants signaling devices telling all the other grass plants in the neighborhood, there is some maniac out here chopping my head off. Go protective. And plants can go definitely protective. A lot of the pathogens that impact our tomatoes, our pepper, our other produce crops, not only can the plant recognize that, hey, some bad guy just moved into the neighborhood here. I see him out there on my leaf. But they can even identify which one it is, if it's really healthy and if it has been exposed to it before. And generally speaking, that takes several generations to build that identification. But plants are capable of that. University of Wisconsin did a fascinating study. They sprayed a kale plant with a calcium compound, and they put a caterpillar on it. This calcium compound would go fluorescent in a black light. In like 130 some seconds, that entire kale plant was just incandescent, just glowed. University of Missouri, apparently they saw this, they took it a step further. They recorded the sound of a caterpillar chewing on a kale plant. They took another kale plant, they sprayed it with that same calcium compound. They just played the recording. They didn't put a caterpillar on it. About 140 seconds, that entire plant had gone defensive, producing chemical compounds that would be unappetizing to the caterpillar. Plants are incredible. They're a whole lot more complex than we think they are. And basically that whole plant immune system, the defense mechanisms, begins with amino acids combining to form peptides, peptides forming to form proteins, and proteins are basically the signaling devices of the plant's warning system. Hey, something's not right here in the neighborhood. It's kind of like our police department, our neighborhood watch groups. That's what these proteins do. So, biostimulants, and I think I'm about done here, biostimulants, they're important not only for soil productive potential, they're not only for environmental cleanup, other environmental issues, but they're really important for plant defense responses. And I don't think anybody in the room takes a great deal of pleasure in spraying a fungicide, but when we have to do it, we have to do it. And I won't even think twice about recommending it. But we do need to keep in mind that we are creating a potentially negative effect. This is just some of the things that we've done with biostimulants down through the years. This is a study out of Penn State University. We took a couple of tomato varieties, a couple pepper varieties. We had a zinnia, we had a broccoli. This is showing one of the pepper varieties. We saw using a biostimulant designed specifically for for germination and early vigor, early growth, we saw more even emergence. We saw, once we started cleaning and dissecting these plants, we saw larger root systems. We saw larger, longer radical roots. A lot of researchers will say the length of your radical is determined by the vigor inherent in the seed piece itself. I think that's very, very important. But we can also impact it. We impact the number of seminal roots. We impact the beginning of the true root system. And we see more vegetative mass. This just some stuff we did at the Horse Progress Days in Amish Function, northern Indiana. We had 28 varieties of tomatoes in there. And we had some really nice production on everything except some of the heirlooms. because we were feeding them like the determinants. It is not a good idea to put heirlooms and determinants in the same row. They grow differently. This is one of my clients over in Wisconsin. You can see he's growing tomatoes in pots on a concrete floor. He has emitters, 2 emitters in every pot. We hit 54 pounds per plant in the 2022 season. He told me beginning of the 2023 season, he said, I want to go for 70. I went, how about we go for 57? 54 to 70, that's a big jump. Well, we didn't hit the 70. When he shut his market down on October 31st, because he retails everything, $4 a pound for tomatoes. He retails every tomato that he takes off his farm. And on October 31st, it doesn't matter what the plants look like, I'm done, the market's closed, it's over for the season. He sold 66 pounds of tomatoes per plant. Photo on the right was taken in late September, and when I was there on like the 3rd or 4th of November, there was still that kind of fruit load on those plants. So we grew 70 pounds, we just didn't get to market 70 pounds. That's another client of mine over in Wisconsin. This is some outside tomatoes. I was there visiting one day and I said, you know, Joe, I said, have you looked at your tomatoes out here yet? Or recently? I said, you need to pick those things. He said, well, I don't have any place to go with them. He said, normally my tunnels, my high tunnels, they're done producing by this time of the year and I'm having to rely on outside tomatoes. He said, that stuff that you have me using, my high tunnels are still going strong. He said, I have no place to go with these. I did ask if I could help myself. He said, take all you want. So I helped him reduce his waste by 2 tomatoes. I took them home. They were delicious. This is some peppers, another client of mine there in Wisconsin. All of that basically right there was trash. No more market. We outproduced every client I've got this year. We significantly outproduced our market demand. Now, a lot of my guys, we sell into the wholesale markets. Joe, the guy with the concrete floor and the pots on the tomatoes, now they're selling out retail. But, you know, we all made our contracts. We had excess. We plowed down beautiful, beautiful crops. This is some peppers over down in South Central Illinois. I don't work with this gentleman directly. I try and get by and see him every couple of years. This is probably, his name's David Zimmerman. He is probably the best pepper grower I have ever known. I mean, this man can grow peppers. That picture on the right, we had a field walk down there this past summer. That's what the peppers look like. He told me he had already picked about 12 per plant off. And that's a lot of peppers. This is another client of mine in Wisconsin, sandy ground. As I said, we made all of our contracts. We had way too much produce left over. And they asked me this year, well, maybe, because they normally on bells, they'll grow about 300 acres of bells. They'll grow about 100, 150 acres of jalapenos and serranos. Do we cut back our acres this year, 2024? I said, absolutely do not cut back your acres. I would rather be plowing down perfectly good crops than we have a really bad growing season and we can't fulfill our contracts. In the wholesale market, that is the worst. So that's just some more peppers in Wisconsin. This is a little project that I did, and I'll finish with this. We got involved in organic production here about 4 or 5 years ago. We'd been involved for a number of years in a small way. We made the commitment that, okay, if we're going to be involved in organic production, let's get involved. Ray literally traveled the planet, South America, Europe, Africa, looking for what we could just find as far as the best organic products on the planet. Ray doesn't like to have second best on anything. Those of you that know Ray, I think you would agree with that. But anyway, this is a material that we found down in Chile. It's a salmon-derived fish product. This is a research project that I did back in 2022. You can see the total pounds per plant, the control versus the Bioterra Green, and the average fruit size. I saw a significant impact. Now, I spent a lot of money on that little project. 2 times, it was hot, I was tired, it was the end of the day, I had to put material on, I couldn't find my measuring equipment, so I used an empty Coke glass. I did mark how much I put on. Months later, when I'm figuring all this out, putting the data together, I figured out how much I put on, and I went, uh-oh. I put on like 3 or 4 or 5 times more than I should have. I spent about $178 an acre on this product to get that response. That gave me back $2,740 per acre in additional jalapenos, based at the wholesale price of 35 cents a pound. Highly responsive. Here's just some other stuff, melons. A lot of our guys on melons and pumpkins were up in that 115 to 130 bins per acre. I've got a gentleman this year down in southern Ohio. He's going to target 200 bins per acre. Some Christmas tree stuff we were doing up in Wisconsin. That's pretty exciting. So with that, gentlemen, I am out of time. We don't have any time for questions, but I will be around. So thank you very much.